giant robots smashing into other giant robots.
This is the Giant Robots Smashing Into Other Giant Robots podcast, where we explore the design, development, and business of great products. I'm your host, Will Larry, and with me today is Jorge Marubia. Jorge is a principal programmer on the product team at 37 Signals. Lots of work in open source, just very big in the Ruby community. So I'm excited to pick his brain and just get to know him. So Jorge, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Will.
Yeah, we were just talking about it. He's in Spain right now. So tell me a little bit, what's going on in your life? How is Spain right now? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I live in Spain. I'm Spanish. I live in Oviedo, which is a city in the north of Spain, which is not as sunny as what most people know about Spain. It's more like kind of rainy, but now in the summer it's very, very nice. Okay. And in life, well, I've been, very busy with life and work in general. I have two daughters, two little daughters. And regarding the work itself, lately I work at 37 Signals as a principal programmer, as you said. So I'm in the product team, and I've been working here for 7 years. So I've been involved in all sorts of projects. Lately, I've been quite busy with the launch of the version 5 of Basecamp, which is our latest version of Basecamp, which is like the flagship product of the company. And I've been involved in a pretty exciting project, which is Lexxy, which is a rich text editor that our intention is for it to become the next standard rich text editor of Rails. And that's what I've been up to lately.
I want to start off with this. So if I understand correctly, you started off in enterprise Java when you started your coding career, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Okay. I was super involved in Java when I started. And, like many Java folks, I started to hear about Rails, this Rails framework that was becoming super hot in the 2005, I believe, when it became like this big thing that started to get a lot of traction. And I was like kind of, back in the day I was working in the public sector in Spain. I was working for the for the IT department of the Social Security Office, which wasn't like super fun. And I was like kind of dreaming with, oh my God, I wish I could work with Rails, because I was like super hooked into how Rails was looking. And actually, because I was involved in Java, I could learn like a lot of problems that I could see how some folks wanted to repeat in Rails, like in terms of bringing a lot of complexity into software. So it's been a super interesting journey.
Yeah. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because you had a dream of civil servant, and then you kind of moved into engineering. Is that correct?
Well, I was a civil servant at first, but I was like working as a developer. Like it was like it was an IT position, working in a unit that was like developing software for the Social Security Office. So it was kind of a developer position itself, but the environment was a little bit dysfunctional and not very, very exciting and motivating in general. But it was about software.
Yeah. And I think for developers, that's a big thing. Like if it's boring and not exciting, it's just, I've been in a couple of jobs like that, and it's not fun. It's just like, okay, why am I doing this? I like jobs where it's something new every day, different problems, and I get to learn something different. So I totally understand.
For sure. Saying. And also you live in the States, and in the States you're very lucky because you have a very powerful industry. So there are a lot of companies and a lot of, startups and product companies that are developing things. That's a common theme in the States. In Spain, it's not exactly like that. I mean, here we have like a lot of consultancy. A lot of working. If you want to work, I mean, for example, there are not product companies here. Like very very few software product companies here compared to the States. I mean, there are some product companies, but it's not like that easy. So it's not as easy to get to work in a place that excites you or is very interesting from a technical point of view. It's absolutely possible, but my point
Yeah.
is that it's harder. It's harder. So actually, my first job after the social security office thing was working for a Canadian company uh,
Okay.
called Van Zugel, which they are still going, and it's an amazing small company that was also a Rails shop. That was my first professional experience working with Rails, and for me it was like night and day. It was like replacing this dysfunctional environment with a wonderful small company that where it was very clear what to do, how to do it, and working with interesting folks I could learn from. And that was quite a good change for me. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's one thing I've realized. If it's a well-structured company, I do really, really well in it. I know how to win. I know what the
yeah,
are, and then I can kind of dream outside of that box. But when it's not clear, it's really tough. So, yeah,
yeah.
totally
I
understand
know,
that.
I know, I know.
Yep. So I kind of resonate with you on this one, but I read somewhere that you applied 5 times to 37 signals before you got hired.
Yeah, that's true. I did. I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, 37 Signals had been in my radar for a long time. At first, as something like I couldn't even think of working for, but eventually, as I gained experience, I started to really consider it as a real possibility because they were hiring folks from everywhere around the world. So I tried several times. On some occasions, I didn't have. I mean, there was no an opening position at all. In some other occasion, I just wasn't hired. Like I didn't. I never heard back from them. And but there was an opening like in 2019, I believe,
Mhm.
where it worked out, and I managed to get in there. Yeah.
And now, 7 years later, you're still there. That's in dog years. That's a very, very long time, especially for developers.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, it's not rare in the company itself. Like, people are. I mean, I work with folks who have been here for 15 years, 17 years.
Mhm.
That's not that rare. Like,
Yeah,
there
that's
is like
awesome.
there are a lot of folks who have been here for a long time, and in general, I think it's. I mean, for me personally, it works very well because I think you really. I mean, it really takes a lot of time to get familiar with how uh, how to work in a place, get to know the people,
Yeah,
the dynamics, the culture. I think it's. I mean, it depends on the kind of person. But for me, it's like I rather stay. I mean, if as long as everyone is happy,
hmm
I like the setup where you are in a place for a long time and get to know everything and everyone. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think I'm coming up on 5 years at thoughtbot. So,
Oh, that's pretty
if
cool.
yeah, if I like the company, I like to stay in it. Like I'm not going to complain because, and you going back to you said 5 times. I remember it was at least 2 times I applied to thoughtbot, and the way they responded to me is actually why I wanted to work here.
Yeah.
Um, I was doing this in person interview, and I just blanked. It was one of
Mm.
those technical interviews where you go in and you like, I know it, I just can't think about it. And they actually turn into a learning, like, okay, let me teach you. If you want to learn, I'll teach you right here on the spot. So,
Mm.
they spent a couple of hours with me just teaching me. And I'm like, you could have easily just, hey, all right, I need to go find somebody else, get out the door, like go ahead. But no, they actually taught me. So I was like, nope, I want to be here. I want to get back in there. And a couple years later, I did. So I totally get what you were saying about that.
Yeah, that's super nice. I would imagine in
Yeah.
Thoughtbot, you get to work on all sorts of projects, right? With all sorts
Mhm.
of with many different companies. That has to be super cool to get familiar.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's pros and cons to it. The pros is probably, I've been here 5 years, and the code bases that I've worked on have been drastically diverse. Some really good ones to some that I'm like, ooh, that's a tough one. So my main language or group or tech stack is JavaScript. And so I've worked on React Native projects, Next projects. I really love that. I think the biggest con for me is sometimes I get stretched too thin because like I'm just like I just want to learn. Like I'm like, all right, let me learn React Native, let me learn React, let me learn Rails, and sometimes
Right.
I feel like I'm not an expert in it.
Yeah, for sure. And actually,
Yeah,
I mean, maybe that's a good sign. They say like
yeah,
the more you know about something, the more you know about what you ignore, right? So maybe if
yeah.
you feel you're not an expert, that's a good sign.
I
You know?
hope so. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, let's start here. Tell me more about Basecamp 5. Y'all just released that. Tell me more about
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, it's been a fantastic release. So yeah, Basecamp is like the flagship product for 37 Signals. It has a huge customer base, and yeah, we've been working for I don't know, over 1 year on a new version, maybe 1 year and a half. I don't know how long have been the development, but yeah, it has like a plenty of huge new features that customers had been requesting for a while. It has a big revamp of the whole user interface with some, a new layout and a new sidebar component, a new menu for notifications, a bunch of changes, and the reception has been pretty good. And it's been like a very successful release, I believe. Stressful on the a bit stressful, like any other release on the dev team, of course, and in general in the company, not only dev team, also support team, ops. Like it has been a big release. So, well, you know how software works until people start using it, and you start seeing like whether it's working or not, or whether you have I don't know, bugs or not. It's always there's always a little bit of tension,
Yeah.
but I think it's been a very successful release. We had a few weeks like fixing things after the launch, as you would expect, but things are pretty calmed down now and looking good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. What part do you play in it? Are you in like security? Are you like feature?
Uh,
Like what's your
no, I'm in the product team
okay.
actually. So I'm in the product team in Basecamp. I've been involved before Basecamp. I mean, when they started to work on Basecamp 5, I was working on Fizzy, which was another product we launched last year,
Okay.
which is Fizzy it's a pretty cool product. It's like a Kanban table, a Kanban board software, a
Yeah.
Kanban software. It's open source, and you can check it in GitHub, and you can run it yourself. And we also offer a hosted version of it that you can use for free. And I think it's a pretty cool project. So I was working on that when they started to work on BC5. And after launching Fizzy, I joined the BC5 effort in the last stage. So I've been involved on all sorts of things in this last stage. It has been mostly, a big chunk of what I did was improving certain features that were already in place but were not production ready, and making sure they were performant and that they were robust from a design point of view. For example,
Mm-hmm.
a key component in Basecamp is the timeline. The timeline is like a screen or a set of screens where you can see what's going on in a given project or in your whole account. And
Yeah.
we are using a completely new design in Basecamp 5 for that, and it was a big rewrite. And it was like kind of a prototype. It was not, I mean, it was usable internally, but it was not something we could launch because it was very, very slow and it had all sorts of issues. So I kind of rewrote that in a way that we could ship it. So I've done that kind of work
Yeah.
essentially, and then I've been like working a lot on making the product stable, like fast. I've been at some point, like a few weeks before launching Basecamp 5, the performance was not good. Was very slow, just because the development team hadn't paid attention to that. They've been more focused on exploring how they wanted the product to be. So there were some serious performance issues, and I also led the effort on the client side. So other developer focus on the backend side, I focus on the front end side. So I've been, benchmarking the, everything in JavaScript and CSS to make
Uh-huh.
sure things were fast. And actually, that was very fulfilling because in a few weeks we managed to get it like super fast as it
Ooh.
is now. And it was like, it was one of those things that you at first there is like a lot of uncertainty, like why is this so slow? And when you
Yeah.
solve the problems, it's like very, I don't know, fulfilling, right? It's something that
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
measure. And yeah,
And
so
that's a
yeah.
huge thing, especially for like Basecamp. The speed, I feel like, is everything
Cool.
because people are in it every day. That's almost like their livelihood is almost in there because they're using it for everything. So I think speed is a key thing for that app,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I guess they always say that the speed is a feature, right? In any kind of software,
Yeah.
like speed is like a feature. So, but it's something that you rarely. I mean, in general, software creators, we often don't pay the attention it deserves. Like it's like an afterthought. You only pay attention to performance after there's a visible problem, but it's so important. And
Yeah.
in something I learned, like it was the first time, well, not the second time. This is a problem that I also saw in Physi, and I want to talk about it because it's interesting. So you know that in CSS, there is like this has pseudo selector, the
Hmm.
has. So which is super handy from a development point of view. But in both Physi and BC5, I learned that it can present a lot of performance issues. Like because when you have like a big DOM tree of HTML nodes, when you're using has in the CSS for nodes at the top
Hmm.
of the tree with a lot of content below, so whenever you mutate the DOM with JavaScript,
Okay.
the browser needs to recalculate the whole CSS just to reply to the has question.
Yeah.
And when you're using has like a lot in a code base, I learned empirically that it's terrible for performance in Safari and in all the browsers. So
Huh.
we had plenty of problems on the client side, but this was one of those, like the use of has. And I remember it also beat us in Physi, but only for Safari there. So yeah, that was a good lesson I'm remembering from the BC5 last stage of development.
Yeah. That's interesting. I did not know that. Were you able to understand why it caused issues? I know you said kind of if you use it at the beginning of the DOM tree.
Yeah, the thing is that imagine that in the body of the page you have a has. Imagine that you have a has. If the body has, I don't know, an element dot item, an element with the class item.
Hmm.
If any of the sub nodes of the child nodes of in the page has a class item, then that selector matches, and the browser needs to apply a background or whatever. So whenever you mutate the DOM, imagine that you mutate like a child of body with some JavaScript to add a data attribute or whatever.
Hmm.
So the browser needs to recalculate for all those selectors in the CSS model. It needs to recalculate whether that condition has changed or not, right?
Okay.
Because the DOM was mutated, maybe you added an item class to the node, so that selector needs to match. And when for complex trees, when you have hundreds of nodes, that's expensive. Like that
Yeah.
computation, if during loading the page you mutate several nodes, and the browser needs to recalculate that condition for all the mutations, that kind of explodes in terms of client side latency, and it's noticeable. You start seeing like milliseconds of the browser computing CSS calculations. And yeah, maybe, I mean, probably
Interesting.
if the DOM is small, it's not an issue, but for
Hmm.
complex pages it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's the tech stack of Base Camp 5? I know it's not built on Rails, but is it React on top of it,
No,
or
no, no. It's only Rails, vanilla Rails. So
okay,
Rails for the front end, the vanilla proposal of Rails is using Hotwire, which
okay,
is Hotwire is like a framework that has several components. It has Turbo, which is a client-side library that is based on server-side rendering, regular server-side rendering, but it has some features to make regular navigation or partial updates possible and fast. So it's still Basecamp is a server-side application in general. It doesn't have client-side rendering, but it's using Turbo that makes things feel very, very fast. To put you an example, when you're using Turbo, when you navigate to a page within the same application, instead of triggering a full HTML document replacement, it's going to keep the head fixed, and it's only going to replace the body. So when you navigate, it feels much faster because you don't have to recompute all the JavaScript, all the CSS. So it feels really fast. And it also has like features to update. For example, when you click this button, I want to update this region of the page instead of re-rendering everything. So it has things like that. So no React, we are using Turbo. And on the mobile side, we are using also Hotwire has a component for building native mobile applications where you can combine native components with server-side rendered screens. So what we have in our native apps, for example, Basecamp has a native app, and what it's doing is has like a native harness that is rendering web views inside. So it's a combination of server-side rendered web screens that we can reuse in both the server and mobile apps, and native components for having higher fidelity in iOS and Android. So that's like the tech we are using. Rails, and on the backend is MySQL as in the database, and we are also using MySQL for caching, for view caching, and for jobs. We are using Rails has two libraries, which is Solid Cache and Solid Queue, and we're using both for jobs and for caching. So yeah, that's the stack. Pretty vanilla Rails tech stack. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because this podcast is a lot of like business owners, founders, people who starting stuff, and I want to ask this question from that point of view. When you and your team sat down to decide what are we going to pick for our tech stack, what did that look like for your team? Because especially using those, because like you said, you have React Native. There's so many ways you could have gone, but and I know you're a big proponent of vanilla Rails. So what made you go that direction?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think that the case of 37 Signals is kind of special because, as you know, David Heinemeier Hansson, one of the founders, is the creator of Rails. So Basecamp, like since they launched the first version of Basecamp, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, I think, or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Or over 20 years ago. And it was like the version where Rails was extracted from. So, David started working on Rails internally at 37 Signals just to support the first version of Basecamp. So through its evolution of Basecamp, because Basecamp has been rewritten from scratch like 3 times, and version 4 and 5 has been built, on top of the same foundation.
Okay.
And in general, Basecamp has always been like a source for extraction towards Rails. So, for example, Active Job, which is the framework in Rails to run backend jobs, was an extraction of Basecamp 3. So, in general, I mean, the approach at 37 Signals when we start working on some product is like, of course, we are going to use Rails, and we are going to use the libraries that Rails provides. But at the same time, the company has a lot of influence on the libraries that compose Rails and how they evolve. So we detected, for example, after launching Basecamp 5, we detected a serious memory leaking problem in Turbo, in the library we are using on the front end. and we just fix that and push that, push that fix to the library. So kind of the work in these products kind of have a big influence on the libraries and on the things we add, the things we create. Like Lexxy, for example, is another example. Like we needed an editor, we created that editor, and now we are going to make that the standard in Rails because it's so much better than the current Trix editor that Rails proposes. So, in terms of culture, we really try to avoid many dependencies. In software dependencies, sometimes they are like a liability. Like whenever sometimes it looks like a good idea. Like, I'm going to take this and that, and this other developer has created this cool library. I'm going to use it, and you end up with this salad of different technologies that you need to integrate and that you are relying on someone else to maintain. And maybe at first everything works and everything is good, but 5 years later, maybe 3 of those things are not maintained anymore, and now they can become a burden. I would imagine you have seen that happening, right? So, so in general, we try to avoid dependencies, and we really advocate for a vanilla ready setup as much as possible. Like and David, which is like the CTO in the company and the one who sets direction, is very big on that. And he likes simplicity. He likes simplifying. For example, now in Basecamp 3, we are trying to get rid of bundling CSS because we want to offer like the no-build approach that David talked 2 years ago or 3 years ago in Rails World. We are trying to serve the CSS as individual files, just using what the web has to offer without any bundling behind, because it simplifies many things in the development pipeline. It's easier to invalidate a single CSS without having to invalidate all the CSS and getting everyone to download everything. So that's kind of the philosophy in the company when choosing how to proceed.
Yeah, and that's actually, I really like that. And you actually touched on one of the questions I wanted to ask you. What was the point when you said Trix is not enough, let's start developing Lexxy to replace it?
That had been a conversation in the company for years, because Trix had something which was both a feature and eventually became a problem, which is that it was very simple. So Trix is by design, it's a simple editor that was developed in-house in the company, I don't know, in 2013, I believe. And it was pretty robust and it worked great in several products in the company for years. But eventually we started missing features that our customers and ourselves were missing. Like, for example, tables, adding tables or markdown in the editor. And we were finding that, for some features, for example, tables, they were not supported. We would have to rewrite like Trix core to support complex trees where you have like more than 2 levels of nested nodes, different nodes, because the internal model of Trix was very simple. And so in the company we had these frictions and these things we wanted to add, and we explored like all sorts of alternatives to changing editors, like extending Trix, making tables this attachment thing that you can edit with an external interface that an external window or something like that. We also developed like a very simple markdown alternative, which is called House MD, and that we used 2 years ago in Writebook, which was another little product that the company shipped, which is open source now, by the way, which is like for writing books and technical documentation. It's a wonderful publishing system. And essentially, we were not happy with any of the things we had explored for BC5 and for the future in general. So we started to explore alternatives, and we saw that there was this new framework. Well, not new, but this newish text editing framework called Lexical by Meta, which is the framework that it's a framework for building editors, and Meta is using it for its products like Facebook or WhatsApp or so. we loved the idea of using a text editing framework that was maintained by a big company, because
Yeah.
these are like engineering beasts. Like a rich
Yeah.
text editor is so complex these days. And I don't know, this was a big concern for me, because I remember 3 years ago or something like that. I remember that, for example, I was involved in this, like iOS. We detected in an iOS beta version, I don't remember the version, but we detected that it was not working with tricks. Like
Okay.
they had changed like something regarding autocorrection, something like that. And it was not really, the cursor was misbehaving as you selected things, and it was completely broken. And it's like, holy shit, this is going to break like products like Basecamp or Hey for our
Mhm.
customers as soon as they update. So it was kind of a critical incident, right?
Okay.
So I remember like opening tricks and saying, how do I fix this? Like, first of all, is this fixable? Is this can we fix
Mm.
this properly in the way tricks is built? And because there was something obscured related to Safari internals there. So I remember thinking like, is it okay for us to be worried about these things? Because we
Yeah.
want to build a product, but not. So the idea of having someone else maintaining the core editing framework was super appealing. So we prepared an initial prototype. It was very, very promising. So we decided to go for it first in Fizzy. So
Mhm.
Fizzy started using tricks. At some point, we migrated it to Lexxy, and we polished the editor there. And then we started with the effort of using it in Busy 5, which was a big effort. And yeah, we are quite happy with it. Like it was a lot of work at the end. So I think at first I was a little bit naive, thinking like, okay, if we have this text editing framework, it's just a matter of putting things together. But it was way more complex than that. Like
Yeah.
getting getting the right text editing experience in an editor. I mean, Lexical is absolutely fantastic. It's fast, it's accessible, it's performant, but it's very low level. So it's not
Yeah.
going to give you anything, not a toolbar. It's not going to give you a selection
Mm.
model for the attachments you put in the editor. It's not going to handle how the cursor responds when you're selecting things like images or things like that. So yeah, we had to work a lot on getting things feeling right. But now we are super happy with the project. Yeah, I think it turned out to be a good call and a fantastic project. Yeah.
Awesome. Is Lexi open source?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
you
what I
can
thought.
find it at Basecamp / Lexi, and Lexical is also open source. And actually, the license of Lexical is MIT, which was a big decision point, because we also considered Tip Tap Editor. I think it's called Tip Tap Editor, which is based on Prose Mirror. I think is the text. The editing framework behind it, and it's also an amazing text editing framework. But the license wasn't as clear. There was a company behind, and it was like a license that would let you use it. But David pointed out he wasn't super keen with finding ourselves in a situation where the company behind the editor, a few years from now, decides to change the license or whatever. So MIT is the right license we wanted, and that's what a big decision point for going with Lexical.
Yeah. Okay. What is your opinion? Because you're a product company and you have an open source. We talked about this a lot in thoughtbot, but what is your opinion on product versus open source? Like you said, like Lexi. What's your opinion on that?
It's a good question, because there is some tension there, right? Like what I've seen worked great in practice. It's not like I have a lot of experience with open source, despite of all my contributions. I mean, there are folks there who are like fantastic open source maintainers that do that for a living. That's not my case. But what I've seen working at 37 Signals is that the company has some products, and it charges money for those products which are not open source. But the company is very keen on sharing the technology behind those products. So you can
Okay.
get you can see the Basecamp source. But we do have open sourced some products, but not Basecamp and Hey, which are like the main ones we are running now. But all the technology behind Rails, Lexxy, all the Rails frameworks, and a bunch of other libraries, they are open source.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I mean, it's first of all, it's like giving something back to the community, which is fantastic and fulfilling. You get contributions from people outside the company who can, fix bugs or improve things in different ways, which is another advantage. And it's also like kind of a marketing thing, I
Yeah.
believe, or something that speaks good about your company. So I think
Hmm.
it's also positive. And there is not this. I mean, it's a setup that removes this tension of how do I make money by working on open source. So, for
Yeah.
example, I work on open source products like Lexxy. I worked on that, but my salary was paid by 37 Signals, which is a private company which is charging money for its private products. So I think it's a logical scenario, because I know there are amazing folks out there doing a lot of open source that at some point they say, how do I make money? How do I make money if I want to focus on open source? And there are other schemes, but I'm not sure. I know that there's a lot of frustration also, depending on how you do things. So yeah.
No, that's really good because I'm a big believer in open source. Thoughtbot is very big in open source. A lot of things that you name, like that giving back to the community. For what you just named with Lexi, it seems like it's very simple, like a text editor with a toolbar. That is not simple at all with the
Yeah.
so many moving parts and things like that. And you're giving that back to the community because that is a huge ordeal if every company or app had to recreate that. So like I'm a big believer in that and like really appreciate, you giving that back to the community. Um, what is next for Lexi?
Oh, for Lexi. So in terms of, I mean, now we are headed towards Rails World, which is going to be by the end of September. So we want to launch version 1 of Lexi there. We are still polishing things. When we launched Basecamp 5, we spent like weeks before the launch and probably weeks after the launch, like fixing things in Lexi and polishing things. It's a lot of polish and bug fixing. We are still adding features and more configuration options and such. And folks in the community are contributing things too. So we are like, getting enough polish for a nice 1.0 release. And after that, a big area of interest for us is collaborative editing. So that you can have like different folks working on the same editor, because that's a wonderful feature for Basecamp. So I know that's going to be a feature we are interested in exploring, and we have already, by the way, explored that thoroughly, and it's absolutely feasible with Lexi because of Lexical. Lexical has some built-in support for that,
Okay.
so it's a matter of seeing how we use it and how we integrate it. So that's probably the biggest feature I have in mind. In open source, sometimes it's not just in terms of adding feature. In my experience, keeping something tight and small is also a feature on its own. So it's not
Yeah.
like Lexi is very small, but I'm not very keen on adding every feature under
Mm.
can think of, right?
Yeah.
I'm totally keen of adding extensibility. So Lexi is way more extensible than Trix was. You can build there is like an official support for extensions that is wrapping the official support that Lexical offers. So you can use that for doing things like customizing the toolbar or adding new buttons with new functionality that does. So, for example, in Basecamp 5, we have added a feature where you can record voice notes. And that's not part of Lexi, that's part of Basecamp 5, but it's built leveraging this extensibility feature that anyone can use.
Mhm.
So, in terms of like major features, I don't know. I'm sure there are things we could add, but we're going to think hard about, what should be part of the core. and what should be done as an extension that maybe
Yeah.
ourselves or someone else can create. Yeah.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The collaborative part excites me, just thinking through how to work through that and make that possible in real time. That seems like a interesting and fun problem to dive in and solve.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, there is someone in the community. I think his name. I don't know him personally. I know him from Twitter. It's Javier Camara. I think it's his name.
Hmm.
And he did a presentation talking about how to do that with the very, very early version of Lexxy that we shipped, like, I don't know, 1 year ago, something like that. So
Okay.
he explored part of that. There's been a team inside the company who has been exploring that too. Rails has all the elements you need to make that happen, starting
Hmm.
with support for WebSockets with Action Cable, so that you have a bidirectional channel in real time when you are editing things. So and we have experience in the company operating Action Cable, so all the elements are there, and I mean, it's going to be like a large project, but it's not like in Tricks times. It was like, oh my god, this is absolutely impossible. Now it's absolutely possible. It's just a matter of planning it and executing it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, I want to close out in this angle. We have to talk about it, AI.
sure.
Um, I wanted to get your opinion. I know you wrote article "AI Wrote My Code." Um, Tell me more about it. Tell me your opinion. I know for me, I've been coding for 8 years, and the way that I started coding with Stack Overflow, and I remember sometimes it took me days to find just the right solution to solve issues, to all the way
Yeah.
now where we have agents and code and vibe code. And so I wanted to get your opinion on it, and hopefully
Yeah,
share with the audience of what it feels like now in the AI world for a developer.
yeah, for sure. It's a fascinating topic. First of all, is that I know. I mean, I feel like I am like everyone else trying to learn how to use this new superpower. I don't think the situation is clear for anyone. Even when you see like these strong headlines in Twitter or in social media all the time, like about people with giving you very strong advice about how to do things, or if you are not doing this, then you are wrong. If you are not using loops, then you know nothing. It's like, I think we all are like trying to figure out this new thing, and learning things, making mistakes along the way. Uh, in general, like I'm super optimistic, and I'm super absolutely fascinated by AI, and like
Yeah.
any other developer in the world, I'm using it. Like I went from you know not leaving my editor in the whole day to not open. I don't use an editor anymore. Like I'm just interacting with an agents with agents all the time. So which is that tells you something, right?
Yeah.
Uh, I find AI is an incredible productivity multiplier. Like what I see, what I can do now compared to what I could do, like I don't know, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, and 2 years ago was already a multiplier when we were using it in the ChatGPT form, right? Not via an agent, but with ChatGPT was already an amazing productivity multiplier for developers, I believe, because it would be such a suitable way to generate code or to check APIs and things like that. But now it's like holy shit, now it's like it's really mind blowing, and I don't really get used to it. Like some reflection I did the other day is that when I was talking to my daughters, for them it's like, I mean, having a robot that understands you and can reply to questions and can keep context of the conversation, for them it's like a natural thing. For me, it's like something that still blows my mind. It's like I don't get used to it. But in terms of developers, it's not all good. And I think, for example, AI generates slope or poor code. That's a real problem. That's a real thing. So I'm not bullish right now or on unsupervised AI, like
Hmm.
these experiments where AI build a product from scratch with another AI which is adversarial and review things. I'm not super bullish on that, just because what I see on a daily basis is that you need to keep a close eye on the code it
Yeah.
generates. Even when you keep a close eye, the generated code is not as clean and as pristine as the one you would have written from scratch, I believe.
Hmm.
So it's the
Yeah.
same when you have like a messy code base and you can refactor it, and you want to refactor it. I know that the aspiration is to leave the code base in the same way it will be had you writing it from scratch. But that, in my experience, that's more an aspiration than reality. There is always some damage.
Yeah.
So with AI, there is always some damage done when you tackle big projects with it. But it's a damage that is absolutely mitigable with advice and steering and offering your input to the agent. So it's not a big concern. My big concern will be if I was not supervising it, if I was like, okay, this is done, review, merge and ship, that's okay. When you do that on a code base several times, and I've seen this happen, like the damage it causes is real, and it's something that you need to be well aware of. Then there is the factor that also you don't get to. So with AI, something I say is that you can tackle more things. Like with the scope, which you can tackle is bigger, but also you don't get as deep on
Hmm.
specific tasks because the agent can do that for you.
Yeah.
And we were talking about in the company the other day whether that's was a good or a bad thing, right? Because if you don't use your brain, it's like
Yeah.
it atrophies, right? So
Hmm.
uh, there are plenty of fascinating questions. It's also true that now you can think about many more things in a single day than you could think of before because you can tackle many things.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There are plenty of open questions. For me, the overall, I mean, the balance is very, very, very positive,
Yeah.
and I'm fascinated by it. What's your take?
Yeah. No, I'm with you with a lot of that because I think the most dangerous is unsupervised for a couple of reasons. Bad code, but also when that internet goes down and you still have to code, or when you don't have access to AI, or when it's hallucinating and sending you down the wrong path, you have to be able
Yeah,
to course correct and stuff. And I think that was one of my biggest concerns when I first started is like, how do I not lose my knowledge in the coding by using
yeah,
AI in that? And I think the other thing is for junior developers. Like, I wonder
mm,
how junior developers are dealing with it because, like I mentioned, digging a Stack Overflow for hours, even days, trying to figure out stuff, and it didn't give it to you exactly. And you're like, okay, I think I can tweak it enough to make it happen. It's like, that didn't work. Okay, so and it helped me a lot, and it taught me patience, and it's something I had to go through. I wonder what junior developers are going through now with AI and the way I feel like it's easier to hand them the answer and stuff.
yeah. To me, it's not. I mean, I totally see the problems there with junior, and also with. I mean, as a dad, as a parent, also with children. Like I always wonder, like, what's the right balance? Like, because I want my daughters to learn how to think and how to
Hmm.
face a problem where they have to figure out how to solve it and all those things, right? That's essential for developing as a person. And now they have this technology that can solve, like, I don't know, all the problems they are going to face between now and 20 and when they in college, like,
Yeah.
that's. So I guess the humanity is going to have to figure that out because I'm convinced that the next big things, both in software, of course, but also in science, in medicine, everything is going to be driven by
Yeah.
smart folks using AI. So that's going to be like the combo we want. How to educate people, and in the case of software, it's certainly a challenge. I would imagine that the lack of experience with AI. I mean, for starters, AI is the ultimate learning tool. So it's
Hmm.
amazing how much you can learn with AI if you are intentional about it. You can learn about anything. I mean, you could before AI, you could because of internet, right, and YouTube and online articles and everything. But now with AI, it's like it's a different paradigm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree that part of being a good software developer is understanding how, I mean, not going beyond the surface of things, right? Understanding, reading good books, learning solid concepts, understanding and being curious about how things work. But yeah, you need to learn those things. Like I think it's important that you learn those things, even if you then you have an agent executing most of that. I think that knowledge. I mean, an agent is an amazing tool. I think it's an amazing tool for anyone, even for people who don't know anything. But of course, it's like if you had like the ultimate, I don't know, saw or hammer. Do you think a professional carpenter is going to make a better use of that than yourself? Like probably, right? So for me, coding agents is like the more you know, the better you are with them. So if you're a
Mm-hmm.
junior programmer and you want to be a professional programmer and have a career, of course you're going to use AI, but you should be very intentional about learning, what's beyond getting something working
Yeah.
and developing a taste. I can tell you, like, in the last time we hired a junior in the company at 37 Signals, which
Mm-hmm.
was last year, we always ask to do an exercise at home. So
Okay.
they had to do a coding exercise at home, and of course, it's an exercise that today an agent can solve. So we pay attention to the quality of the code, of course. But then in the interview, the person we ended up selecting was the one who was able who offer more knowledge about why he did things. Why did you
Yeah.
name that method like that? And he will reference a book because of so he was sharing real knowledge and real intention.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that would be the advice I would give any junior programmer like now, that you need to study, you need to really work hard in your knowledge, because yeah, it's going to make a difference. So to me, the conclusion is not like, oh, these agents can do anything, then I don't know, junior programmers are useless now. It's not like that. I don't think it's like that at all. Like, the agents are amazing in the tools of smart humans right now,
Mm-hmm.
at least. So I would try
Yeah.
to to become that. Yeah.
Definitely. No, I
Yeah.
totally agree with you on that. That's really, really good information. So please listen to the information Jorge is giving you. I think it's spot on. It'll make you a better developer in the long run. Or as we close, is there anything else that you want to share or advertise or anything?
No, not really. Well, you can find me in X or in jorgemanrubia.com if you want to reach out. By email, email is open if you want to write me. I'm going to be in Resworld by the end. I think it's the 22 of September or something like that. I don't know the date, but it's going to be in Austin. So maybe I can meet someone listening the podcast there.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast. For the podcast, it was super nice.
Yeah, thank you for being here, and we'll share your information in the podcast notes. So it was great talking to you. I really appreciate it. I've learned a lot. So,
Thank you.
all right, let me close it out. You can subscribe to the show and find notes along with a complete transcript for this episode at giantrobots.fm. If you have questions or comments, email us at host@giantrobots.fm. And you can find me on LinkedIn at Will Larry. This podcast is brought to you by thoughtbot. Thank you so much for everything, and catch you next time.